Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the latest episode of Game of Thrones, The Queen's Justice. And I overall enjoyed this episode, but there were some parts of it that I don't think worked as well as they could have, or should have really been in here if they weren't going to do more with them. But overall, with what was going on with finally getting the meeting between Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, really worked out pretty well, I think. So this episode actually dives right into it with Jon Snow and Ser Davos arriving at Dragonstone and just having them kind of meeting with Tyrion and Missandei and seeing Jon and Tyrion kind of reunite after so long was kind of cool because it wasn't that big of a relationship, but they had a mutual respect for each other. And it was funny seeing Tyrion call him the Bastard of Winterfell and Jon retort the Dwarf of Casterly Rock, and then just them having them shake hands was pretty cool. And especially talking about how they've all got more scars than they used to and everything and what they've gone through since they've last seen each other. Talking about, the last time I saw you, you were pissing off the wall and all that kind of stuff. So then he introduces them to Missandei as the advisor to the Queen, and asks them to relinquish their weapons and all that, and Jon agrees. He gives them their weapons, and then we see them kind of taking the rowboat as well into the Dothraki, and they're kind of just going along, getting into Dragonstone and everything, and kind of figuring out everybody. Ser Davos talking to Missandei to try and figure out what's going on, learning where she's from and all that, and saying this place has kind of changed. So then they're kind of just walking up and kind of just getting back into what's going on. Tyrion asking about Sansa and all that, telling Jon that they did not consummate the marriage and all that. He's like, well, I didn't ask. And well, I'm just making sure you know and all that, because he was worried about her saying that she's smarter than she lets on, and Jon saying that she has been letting on. It's and he's like, okay, that's pretty good that she's actually using her smarts and everything. So as they're kind of getting up there, he's like, so you're gonna have to tell me how a Night's Watch recruit goes to being King of the North. He's like, yeah, why don't you tell me how you became the Hand of the Queen? And he's like, well, I was drunk for most of it and everything, so I don't quite remember it all that well. And he's like, well, I'm surprised that you came because most people would have advised against it. I would have advised against it. That, it doesn't really turn out well for when Starks go south. And he's like, well, good thing I'm not a Stark. And then, of course, that's when the dragons fly over and startle Jon and Ser Davos, and of course that's a nice homage to us knowing Jon's parentage, but him still not knowing yet. It's okay, and seeing them kind of stare at the dragons and everything, and turning yeah, you never really get used to them. And they're just kind of getting themselves composed back as they're going back up. So then we see Melisandre standing on a cliff kind of watching them, and Varys comes up to her being wondering why you didn't go to greet them or whatnot. And she's like, well, I didn't part on the best of terms with the king and his advisor because I made mistakes and everything. And terrible mistakes. So Varys is like, alright, then where are you going to go? And she's like, Volantis and all that. And it's because that's the main seat of the Lord of Light religion and all that. Probably going to check in with the Red Priests and Priestesses to kind of see what to do next. And, of course, Varys tells her it would be best for her not to come back. But she's like, oh, Spider, I have to come back. I have to die in this country just as you will. And, of course, Varys is really kind of has a confused look, kind of shocked, kind of that's kind of a weird thing to say. And he's kind of weirded out as he's looking out on the ship that brought Jon and Ser Davos to Dragonstone. So then we get the kind of big thing that we've been waiting for. We see Jon and Ser Davos are taken into the throne room where Dany is sitting, and Missandei, of course, gives all the titles for Dany and all that, being introducing her. And then I just love how Ser Davos is like, oh, this is Jon Snow, King of the North. And just simple, none of these other titles or anything, just doing it. And seeing kind of the awkwardness of how Jon's kind of standing there he's not comfortable being in command positions. He can lead well, but all this pomp, circumstance, all this kind of bullshit to him, he's never been comfortable with. Now, granted, he's usually been pushed to the sides for these things, so he's not been groomed with it, but I just kind of love that he doesn't really look like he wants to be there at all, though he is doing it for his people, which is why it makes him a kind of great character, just seeing him not like what he's doing, but doing it for the right reasons. So, we kind of get into it, and of course, she's calling him Lord and all that, and I was like, well, he's the king, Your Grace. You should treat him with the respect that he deserves. And he's like, I don't have any, and of course she's like, he's like, I don't have any formal education and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, he's a king, Your Grace, you should refer to him as such. But she's like, well, I don't know much about the Seven Kingdoms, but I knew that the last king in the north, Torrhen Stark, bent the knee to Aegon and pledged to serve my house in perpetuity. And of course, going into this kind of war of words kind of thing, being like, oh, that means forever and all that, and you should, like, keep to your oaths and all that. And she was assuming that he would come to bend the knee, and he's like, I'm not. And it's like unfortunate that you're here to break faith. And he's like, listen, your father burned my grandfather and uncle alive. So you're kind of being a little bit stupid trying to say that I'm breaking faith. You know? And of course she's like, well, my father was an evil man. And she does something really big. She apologizes on behalf of House Targaryen for that. And says not to judge a daughter for the sins of her father. I'm like, yeah, definitely. But that leads to his wariness. Since House Targaryen like to inbreed, if you get that kind of crazy thing going on, insanity kind of is a genetic thing almost at that point. And it's like, okay, is she going to be just as crazy? So Jon's fears are warranted, but also are Dany's because, granted, she says that she has the right to rule the Seven Kingdoms, and she's trying to see all these people trying to take power for themselves. But I don't agree that she has the right. Aegon took control of Westeros. And the only thing that kept his family in control was pretty much using what power that people gave them, essentially. So it's like, yeah, you have the house and everything, and all of your family is usually rule the Seven Kingdoms. That doesn't mean you're the best person suited to rule the Seven Kingdoms. So it's like, gotta watch out for that, Dany. And just seeing him kind of really getting into it. Like, Dany saying that, like, listen, when our houses worked together, there was peace for centuries. I believe that we can achieve that again. Like, we bury this, make you warden in the north and all that, and just kind of get this back together. And of course, Jon's like, listen, I'm not beholden to my ancestors. You need my help, and I need your help. And of course, she's like, am I missing something? How do I need your help? I mean, I've got all this army. She's listing all this stuff with the Dothraki and the dragons and all that. And Jon's like, pretty much calling it pretty straight. And we see her reaction as she's going into it. As Jon's like, listen, you haven't taken King's Landing yet. You got the dragons and everything. You got the army. You could have just went in and conquered it in a day. That tells me that you're here not to, like, harm and kill innocent people, because that would have been the fastest way. And she's, like, really kind of taken aback and like, oh, he does kind of know what he's talking about. And he's like, I'm pretty sure you're better than Cersei. It's why we need to help each other. And the thing is, us, right here, right now, you, me, Cersei, we're all children playing a game and screaming that the rules are unfair. And of course, Dany's kind of pissed off, like, oh, you're, like, insulting me and calling me a child, and Tyrion's like, I think he's using it kind of as a figure of speech. And then Jon starts dropping all the stuff about the White Walkers and the Army of the Dead. He's like, listen, this is the true enemy. I know it sounds crazy, but this stuff, while important, pales in comparison to the threat that we face to the north. That the enemy to the north. And of course, Dany's like, well, to me, you are the enemy in the north. He's like, I am not your enemy. And just seeing Jon put that no-nonsense kind of stuff right out the bat and just, like, really get into it. Like, listen, we need to help each other defeat this. It's the living versus the dead. And I know, Tyrion, do you think me to be a liar or a madman? And he's like, no, I know you know what you're doing. And he's trying to, like, get her to understand what he's talking about, kind of trying to walk a little bit towards her to kind of, like, get his point across. And, of course, the Dothraki are pretty quick to, like, snap up to protect their queen. And it's like, holy crap. And, of course, they kind of get into the whole Robert thing because she kind of comes down walking towards him and talking about how Robert had sent assassins after her. Father probably didn't know or did or whatnot. And she's been through all these horrible things, and the only thing that has kept her through is faith in herself, not in gods or legends or myths or whatnot. That faith in who she is got her through. And I'm like, yeah, she has. And she's done all of these awesome things. Getting the Dothraki to Westeros, getting the Unsullied, freeing slaves and all that. Listing her accomplishments, pretty much showing how strong she is. And then, of course, this gets Sir Davos to kind of stand up for Jon Snow. Talking about, like, listen, he has seen these things. And I know it's hard to believe, but he has made allies with the wildlings. He has fought the Night King. He has been the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He has become the King of the North. He has, like, taken a knife in the heart for his people. He's given his own life. Before he was able to finish it, Jon looks at him and he's like, listen, he is here to help people. And it doesn't matter whose skeleton sits on the Iron Throne when the enemies come. And he's here to protect the North and kind of protect everybody. And he's like, I don't know you. You don't know me. The only thing you got is your father's name to claim this throne, which was a crazy-ass motherfucker. So, of course, he's like, I'm not here to bend the knee. And she's like, alright, that's fair. But since I think I'm the Queen of Westeros, and I'm putting forth my claim to all the kingdoms, you're an open rebellion. And that, of course, is kind of where it's ended, because Varys comes in and asks her quietly to dismiss the guests, and then gives them the news that the Greyjoy and Dorne fleet were attacked by Euron, and that they are either captured or killed, like the Greyjoys, and the representatives from Dorne, and that only 2-3 ships escaped. And they're kind of like, whoa, we're kind of screwed up right now. This, of course, leads to a small scene showing us the fans getting pulled out of the water by one of those ships that survived, and telling that he had tried everything to try and save her, and he's like, and I guess the captain of the ship's like, if you tried everything, you wouldn't be here. And of course, everybody kind of disperses, and Theon is just feeling like shit. I'm like, okay, but that's where the scene ends. That was one of the, like, weird things that, like, it could have either been done later on to have more of an arc with Theon, or just didn't really need to be there. It kind of, like, broke it up. Now, granted, we kind of needed a little bit of a breakup from what was going on with us getting the information with Dany and Jon, and seeing those two characters interact. So it's like, okay, I just thought it could have either been better placed or put somewhere else. So, of course, then we get to see the fallout with Euron leading his gifts through King's Landing, talking like an asshole pretty much, saying that this is making him hard and all that, seeing people throw shit at Ellaria Sand and spitting at her. Not really people doing much to Yara, except Euron having her on a pretty much collar and everything, pulling her along, and just kind of being like an asshole rock star kind of thing. Being like, yeah, I'm a dick. Very kind of reminiscent of Ramsay mixed with Joffrey. More of Joffrey's kind of pump, but more with the cold calculation of Ramsay. So he's an interesting character in that regard, because he keeps that element of unpredictability in the mix. So he rides his horse with all of his captives into the throne room, kind of similar to Tywin Lannister when he had, like, defended the city, and presenting his gifts. Of course, Ellaria sees the mountain and all that, spitting at Cersei, Cersei saying, well, you'll receive your reward after the war is won. You will command the navy. Jaime will command the armies and all that. And of course, Euron taunts Jaime, saying, "We are his brothers. I need to ask you some advice. How she likes it. Rough, gentle, finger up the bum kind of thing." And Jaime's like, fucking, well, just wait. We'll see what happens. If you betray us or whatnot, your head could be on a spike. And he's like, oh, it doesn't matter whose head's on a spike. People just like heads on spikes. And it's like, I'm interested what they're going to do with him. Because I know it's probably going to end in some weird, crazy kind of way for him, but I can't wait to see what the journey takes us with that. So, of course, that's kind of where we're left off with them kind of just getting into the adulation of the crowd and all that. And then we cut to, of course, Cersei and Ellaria and her daughter in a cell with like the mountain there and all that. This scene, it felt that the shots were weird in my opinion. It just didn't feel up to snuff to the other kind of scenes that were going on throughout the episode and like kind of previous quality. I don't know if it was mainly the lighting or whatnot, and also possibly the characters involved. I didn't mind Cersei kind of gloating and kind of like screwing over Ellaria and her daughter. It was just mainly, you knew it was coming because Dorne wasn't really that investing. I was more invested in Prince Martell and Prince Oberyn and dealing with them more than Ellaria and her daughters, because Ellaria and her daughters weren't really fleshed out that much. Because, well, Ellaria was the most fleshed out, but the other daughters I really didn't feel much of a connection to because they didn't have much of a character. So, of course, Cersei's doing her monologues and everything, talking about how she's mainly just doesn't really sleep much anymore, kind of similar to Robert, just thinking about ways to kill her enemies. And we see that her lips are brighter than they were in the throne room, and we find out that she used the same poison that Ellaria had used on Myrcella on her daughter, and was going to leave her to watch her daughter die in the same way as they are chained to the walls together, trying to get to each other, and they just leave her there, and she's going to leave Ellaria alive to rot in there until she dies. So, I didn't mind this kind of resolution to the Dorne story, because I didn't really care that much about it. Now, granted, we could get more stuff from Dorne going further on, but I felt that this effectively kind of closed it up and like, okay, we'll see what's going on later with that throughout the rest of the realm. So, then we get to see Jaime and Cersei, and, of course, she's getting strings of victories. It's like, holy shit, that's because everybody's underestimated her as a crazy batshit lady. Granted, she is that, but she knows how to tactically move stuff. Dany, on the other hand, has not orchestrated a war on this kind of terrain before. Though she understands how to wage war in like Essos, she still needs to figure out what's going on in Westeros and get her foothold there. So that's why she's like, why it's important that Euron's armada was able to take out the armada that she was sending to Dorne to gather those troops, because they needed to help reinforce the Tyrells in their siege of King's Landing. So we get to see Cersei just go in, pretty much start kissing Jaime. Jaime first said no, but then she starts going for oral on him, and then it cuts to the next morning. They had slept together. Someone was knocking on the door, and Cersei went to answer it. And Jaime's like, don't do that. She's like, I'm the queen. I can do whatever I want. Pretty much taking on lots of traits that Robert Baratheon did, which I find really interesting in her character traits because she hated Robert a lot. And seeing her kind of take the drink like he did, take the abuses of power, well, not abuses of power. Robert didn't really abuse his power more than just eat, drink, and whore, because he couldn't have that thing, Lyanna Stark. And Cersei got what she wanted, but at such a high cost that she doesn't care. So, of course, the maid had come to tell her that the representative from the Iron Bank was there to talk to her, and like, Okay, so she goes up, and we kind of start understanding what's going on. The Iron Bank wants to call in. Well, they're pretty much feeling out to see what horse to bet on. And Cersei's like, listen, just stay a fortnight, cutting to the chase most often than not, and the representative will be like, well, you are like your father. You will stay here as my guest, and you will be paid. All the debts will be paid. It's like, okay, how is she planning on doing that since Casterly Rock has no more gold? And, of course, she was able to put forth the arguments that it would be worse to back Dany since she's more of a revolutionary and has hit the Iron Bank's slave trade. And it's like, okay, she does put forth some interesting points and definitely shows that the Iron Bank would probably back her more than anybody else on the field. So, that was a pretty good kind of thing to show what the Iron Bank would be doing behind the scenes, since we hear of it doing it that a lot, but haven't really seen it much, and using it effectively to kind of bring everything together, showing that they have been thinking of other people taking the Iron Throne, but their understanding of why it would be best to go with Cersei more than anybody else. So, then we get to see kind of Jon and Tyrion, of course, doing their kind of brood off on the cliff. Tyrion kind of making fun of it like, oh, I came here to brood, but you're so good at brooding that you're making me fail at brooding and all that. And just kind of like pissed off at their situations because Tyrion's like, I should have seen the attack coming on the Greyjoys and the Dornish and figuring out what to do. Jon's like, how do I tell people who don't know me that an enemy that they don't believe in is coming to destroy us all? And he's like, yeah, that's a good question. I know it's a good question. I need an answer. And he's like, well, why don't you help me figure out how to, like, get out of this mess and everything? And just get more allies. And it's just, like, really kind of funny seeing them with really hard kind of questions that they need answering to. And, of course, Tyrion's like, well, listen, when you come at people with, like, the White Walkers and the Army of the Dead, these things are too big for certain people's minds. Maybe you need to get something smaller. Like, what can I help you with? Is there something I can help you with that I can get for you? Like, what do you need? What can I help you with? And especially since Jon has been lamenting the fact that I'm a northern fool and all that. Well, maybe you and the foreign invader that you're lamenting have more in common than you think. She has been fighting and protecting people from monsters, so why don't you go talking around the, like, Dragonstone and everything to kind of see who she is, learn who she is. And, of course, after Tyrion's like, what can I help you with? We get Dany and Tyrion talking about the Dragon's Glass. And she's like, okay, he wants Dragon's Glass? Yeah, volcanic glass, obsidian. You've evidently got a lot of crap, a lot of it under here, and you didn't even know about it. And he's like, listen, we need allies and everything. So, give him nothing. This is a nothing to you, as something to help strengthen our relationship with a prospective ally. And, of course, she's like trying to think and ruminate a little bit more and brings up that Davos said he took a knife in the heart. Do you understand what that means? And, of course, Tyrion's like, they're dreary in the north. They have to do some things to liven stuff up. And it's like, they need to embellish to liven it up. It's like, oh, you really need to kind of... There's been a lot of stuff that's happened that you don't even know about. So, I really liked how Tyrion was able to be like, listen, this is supposed to be weapons to help them fight these monsters to the north. It really will not affect us whatsoever if we give this to them. If it's imaginary, fine. If it's not, they're just wasting manpower and stuff, it's fine. They will just let them have it. Because then that will make them more receptive to any other demands that we need. And I really liked how he was able to appeal to Dany in that way, and Dany to actually kind of listen. So, then we kind of see them talking, Dany and Jon, and she, of course, is bringing up Viserys and Rhaegar because they're looking at the dragons, telling them that that's who she named him after, the two brothers that she lost, and saying that she was sorry that he had lost two brothers. And, of course, she'd been like, I've been talking to Tyrion. He's like, yeah, he's really good at talking. And She's like, well, we enjoy what we're good at. And Jon's like, I don't. And of course, that's kind of a callback to Rhaegar. Rhaegar wanted to pursue music and everything like that, but was always pushed to combat and battle and all that kind of stuff. He was good at that, but he didn't enjoy it. So it's kind of cool seeing that Jon, at first, would probably think that there's honor and everything in the fighting, but as he has grown older and gone through all these things, he doesn't like fighting. He's good at it. He doesn't like it. He doesn't like leading. No, he's good at it. And seeing Dany be like, that's kind of an interesting take on that. And, of course, he knows that you're not Cersei, and he's not changing his mind, and she hasn't changed hers either. And seeing them that they're like so alike in what they're trying to do is like, alright, so I will allow you to mine the dragon's glass. I'm going to provide the men and resources and get to work. And, of course, he leaves, and she's looking at him as he leaves, just like thinking of what's going on. So, of course, then we get to Winterfell, and we see Sansa doing a good job running everything that's going on. Talking to her new maester, getting the idea that all of the food and grain and everything needs to be put into Winterfell, learning that there's really not that much for, like, only about, like, a year or whatnot, and trying to get so that all the food is at Winterfell as a fallback position. And she's like, what's the longest winter been recorded? She's like, I don't know, let me check Maester Luwin's records. He's always had a copy of, like, every Raven sent. And then Baelish looks at him like, what? So there could be something important that Sansa or anybody else around Winterfell might learn from those copies if Baelish doesn't burn them first. So he goes off to take care of the food. We see the one lord at the Eyrie, from the Eyrie guy. Sansa kind of sends him off to tell the people to have leather put onto the breastplates as well to protect them from the cold and all that. It's like, oh, that's a good idea. Alright. So, of course, we see Baelish and Sansa moving. Baelish is trying to get her to understand the danger of Cersei, but Sansa knows that. Sansa calls him on that, and you're like, oh, no, what have I been doing? I'm like, yes, you might not have your complete checkmate down for, like, certain chess moves throughout, like, the Game of Thrones of, like, playing that with other people. But you understand how to play the game. You're getting into that, and you're understanding that, listen, I know what I'm talking about. I know how dangerous Cersei is. Granted, I'm learning and getting through this. I know what to do, Baelish. And just how she sasses him is just great. I'm just loving how she's gotten more confident on that and be like, oh, and essentially getting almost an Arya kind of whip crack of humor on people, even though she's not using it for humor. She's using it to be like, deflate his ego and to stop him from doing that stuff. So he's like, gives her like one kind of like pretty big piece of advice of like, don't fight to the north, south, anywhere. Fight every battle, everywhere, in your mind. Everyone's an enemy, everyone's a friend. Think of every situation so that way you're not surprised. And it's like, okay, that's really good. How has that been working for you, Baelish? I bet you the White Walkers were in your like whole little scenario of like, I'm gonna take this kingdom, and like that kind of fucked that up. Have to see how I can turn this. But of course he hasn't seen them, so he probably doesn't believe. So we'll see. Of course, a runner comes to bring Sansa to the gate. And who do we see? Bran and Meera. And Sansa, just seeing her reaction to Bran, just like crying and coming up and hugging him, and then seeing Bran not really have a reaction. He has changed as a character, and he has become the Three-Eyed Raven. He is, yes, he's changed, but he hasn't completed that transformation yet. He is getting to the point where he's like trying to become the Three-Eyed Raven and what that actually means. And of course, then we see Bran and Sansa talking in the Weirwood, saying that he's the Three-Eyed Raven, what he's learned, what he's seen, and trying to get him to explain that. He's like, well, you were very beautiful that day in your wedding dress and all that, and really getting into the details. And also saying before he got into that since Sansa said she wished Jon were there, he's like, yes, I wish he was here too. I have something to tell him. It's like, okay, he's going to be the one that provides the information of Jon's lineage. Now that depends if it's going to be when Jon comes back up to Winterfell, because I don't think he is going to leave the South that fast because of things that are going on. Or if Bran and them are going to have to go and kind of meet him halfway. It'll be interesting to see how that falls out. But of course, he tells Sansa all this information that he has seen, and it throws her off completely, and she leaves. And she looks freaked out, like, how could he know that information? It's like, whoa. So, then we get to see Ser Jorah and Sam and the Archmaester, and the Archmaester's looking at him, he's like, okay, it looks like you've healed, you said that you've rested and everything, even though it looks like somebody debraded all of the top layer of the infection and put an ointment on it, but does it hurt? A little bit less. Alright then, you need to go, this is for the infected people. Sam, I'm gonna have to talk to you this evening, and it's like, he leaves, and then Sam's like, yeah, no problem, and he's like, listen, I pretty much consigned myself that I was either gonna die of this disease or kill myself before that happened. He's like, well, he's like, thank you for saving my life. Well, it's like your father saved my life a couple times, so least I can do. And then Sam does a really cool thing. And I know it seems small, but he like holds out his hand to shake Ser Jorah's hand, and he uses both of his hands to shake his hand as thanks. And I'm like, that's cool. Sam is being more confident and just doing things that he believes is right. And it's cool to see his character just grow that way and just become, even though he's the scholarly one and probably won't be the one leading battles, he still has shown the same kind of character growth in what he's doing as Jon has. Jon went from someone who was kind of practicing battle to a battle-hardened commander that can lead armies. Sam has gone from someone who is terrified of everything to dealing with someone who has a highly infectious disease and doing whatever he can to heal them, and then afterwards shake their hand to like get rid of it, like be like, yeah, no problem, bro, and then just kind of walk out. It's like, yes. And of course, he then talks with the Archmaester afterwards, and he's like, well, I forbade it and everything, and you still went through it anyway. And says, like, he's waiting for the other shoe to drop. And he's like, listen, you succeeded. How did you do it? He's like, well, I just read the book and did the instructions. Well, he's like, well, that man's alive today because of you. You should be proud. And he's like, thank you, Archmaester. He's like, well, okay. I need you to take these scrolls and manuscripts and make copies of them because they're falling apart. And then Sam kind of looks at him and he's like, what? You were getting a reward? Your reward is not being immediately expelled. Get to it. Watch out for the paper mites. They all like flesh too. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of what happens. Kind of the usual punishment, reward, just kind of evening out and be like, yeah, I saved the dude's life. And I'm still going to be able to learn stuff. So let's go to it. So then we get back to Dany, and of course she's like pissed off. She wants to sink Euron's fleet, and her idea is to ride her dragons at him. And it was like, you are too important. You are, an arrow takes you out. What happens to those dragons? They lose their shit. And what? Then we don't have a leader, and everything just goes to shit. So, bad idea. Understand the reasoning, bad idea. So, of course, they're trying to figure out a kind of plan of attack, and they're like, well, all we can do is really think about Casterly Rock at this moment. And this is kind of where we head into the tail end of the episode. Tyrion's pretty much narrating as we see the Unsullied attack Casterly Rock, and at first we're thinking, oh, it's going to be really bad and everything. But we find out that Tyrion had been given control of the sewer systems of Casterly Rock. And he had made a secret entryway so that way he can have his whores come in because he couldn't bring them in through any other way. So we see Grey Worm leading his forces going into Casterly Rock and taking out other people. But of course, as we're seeing Grey Worm kick ass and everything, he's like, there aren't as many people here as there should be. He looks out and we see that Euron's fleet has taken out the ships that had brought the Unsullied. And it's like, oh shit. And he's trying to figure out where the rest of the army is. Then we see the cut that Jaime and Lord Tarly and Bronn and Lord Tarly's son are leading the Lannister forces from Casterly Rock to take Highgarden as Olenna is watching. So Dany has suffered two big bloody. Dany has suffered like really two big defeats at this moment. Now granted, it's not a total defeat at Casterly Rock yet, but she has lost her Unsullied forces surrounded by the enemy. She has Highgarden taken out. She's got the Dorns taken out as well. She's pissed at this point and needs to figure out a course of action. So her allies at this point are very scant. So she's going to have to somehow figure out a way to really bring Jon Snow into the fold. Now, granted, it's not going to be that terribly difficult, but she's going to have to work on a way to somehow even out the balance of Jon's immediate danger of the White Walkers and the immediate danger of Cersei, because it's getting fixed that the pincer's going to come and it's going to be the crash, and Cersei won't figure it out until it's too late, and she'll just wipe everybody out, and the White Walkers will take out the rest. So, of course, we get towards the end of it, we see that Jaime has taken out the fighters of Highgarden. He goes and he talks to Olenna, and we get interesting kind of scene going on with this. And he's talking about how they had emptied the larders at Casterly Rock, that the Unsullied are going to have to abandon their position there and trek their way across the continent to get back to Daenerys. And she's like, wow, that is pretty clever. And of course, we see them talking kind of like small talk at first, like the sword that Joffrey had. Of course, Jaime's got Widow's Wail, and Olenna remarking that he was a cunt, and seeing kind of Jaime just like, listen, she's defeated, it doesn't really matter, and just describing how she's done all these kind of horrible things, and yet what Cersei has done throughout everything, she never could have imagined, and that was her weakness. She couldn't imagine what Cersei would do. And just seeing that Jaime loved her and like, listen, she's a disease. We both had a role in spreading this, and it's beyond both of our controls at this point. So of course she's like, well, what's going to happen to me? And he lists off all these horrible ways that Cersei wanted to kill her, and he's like, I talked her out of those. Pulls out poison, puts it into the wine for her, and puts it to her, and she's like, will it be painless? And he's like, yes, I made sure of it. So she drinks it, and with her last, she tells him about the poison, like, good, I didn't want it to go like your son, like Joffrey, clawing at his throat and everything. And she's like, I didn't even know what that poison would do. And he's like, really pissed off looking at her, and she's like, tell Cersei, I want her to know it was me. And I really gotta hand it to Jaime at this point. He could have just pulled out Widow's Wail and, like, eviscerated her there. But he was like, you won. Even as I'm taking you out, you won. So he leaves, pissed off, is like, holy shit. And it's like, yeah, you might think you're in the winning position until you understand how your enemy truly fights. It's like, yeah, I killed your son. I might be dead. You might have taken out my house. You might have taken all of my riches to repay the Iron Bank. Screw you. I still win. And I was just like, that's Lady Olenna. She went out like a badass. And I just really liked how they ended her story, and can't wait to kind of see how this all kind of comes together. How Dany's going to react to all of her losses, and how she's going to try and get Jon Snow to her side. What Jon Snow's going to think of this situation once he finally hears that, like, Bran has made it to Winterfell. How Arya's going to get intercepted into that mix, if she's going to be going down south again against vengeance on Cersei or go north. And kind of how this is all going to pan out and everything. So I really enjoyed this episode, except for like the few things with, of course, Theon and kind of the whole Dorne stuff, but I'm glad Dorne's kind of wrapped up at the moment. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.